Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I'm Ian Ashman. I'm a trustee of CPRE. I'm just having a little trouble with my camera, so you hear me for the moment, and then I will join you. So welcome to everybody. It's great to see such a good group of participants again for our second meeting of the Green Defenders Network. As you may have seen, we're recording this session for the benefit of those who are not able to join at this time. In addition to that, as Alice has just mentioned, it would be good if people can turn off their microphones and cameras when they're not speaking, but please do remember to turn them back on when you want to speak. We're going to run through the matters arising from our last meeting in a moment. We're intending to put together a newsletter, and John will say some more about that shortly. We've also got a great first and main speaker today, Sika from Gunnersbury Park, and we'll have a good long introduction from her on the topic of commercialisation of parks. And then we'll move on to the networking session. So just to warn you when the time is right, that I will be asking people to put up their hands if they'd like to make a contribution. That open session is an opportunity to give us an update on the project where you're defending a green space in London, or where you've got questions or ideas to share. So we'll do that a little bit later on in the meeting, and we'll be running from now until 2 o'clock. And as we're working through lunchtime, I'll be pretty firm about closure. And when you do introductions, please keep them fairly short. I won't be going around the room and introducing people, but when you do speak, if you could please tell us who you are and which organisation you are involved with. So John Sadler from CPRE, our campaigns officer, is going to move on and just tell us a little bit about what's been happening since our last meeting. John, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Ian. So really just firstly, I'm just wanted to outline some of the actions that we've had from coming out of the last meeting. And so we'll see how we've achieved those or not, as the case may be. We have actually a nice clear set of actions. Firstly, for everyone who's attending the meeting to sign up as a Green Defender to receive the newsletter. And hopefully many of you have done that. If anyone hasn't done that, then please do that before the next meeting, and I'm going to circulate after the meeting a link so you can sign up. You can also Google Green Defenders CPRE London and sign up that way, and that will mean that you don't miss any emails, you don't miss any communications from us, and so on.
I'll put a link in the chat, John, now.
Brilliant, thank you, Alice. So that was the first action, partially or all completed. Secondly, for all attendees, if you want information about your campaign or your petition to be added to the newsletter, then please email that to me, john@cprelondon.org.uk. Those of you who've already signed up will know my email, and you will have already received, hopefully, an email from me, a newsletter, one of our first newsletters, which listed all of those petitions, and those we'd encourage you to sign those if you possibly can. That would be hugely appreciated. If you have any new ones, we'll add those to the next newsletter, and any other updates or news that you want to include. And finally, final action of the last meeting, let us have your ideas for future agenda items. You can email those to me as well, john@cprelondon.org.uk. We've already had one or two for our next meeting, which I believe will be in October. We're going to hold quarterly meetings of the group. And so this is our summer meeting. We're going to talk a little bit later after the first speaker about some of the work that we've been doing in terms of casework, just before we close up for the day. But for now, I'll just hand you back to Ian, who will introduce the first speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, John. So I'm going to hand over now to Sika, our speaker for today. She's going to be talking about the work that's been going on at Gunnersbury Park to address the issues of commercialisation of parks, where local authorities have been undertaking activities to generate income, but they are a cause of tension and concern for many park groups and networks. So Sika, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks.
Cheers, Ian. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Cici Donova. I represent the Save Gunnersbury Park campaign. I'm also part of the resident association here at the Gunnersbury Triangle. And on a personal note, I work for ITV. Right, let me start with my presentation because I think a picture paints 1,000 words and worlds, in fact. So let me just present here. Right. Can you see my screen now, please? And the presentation,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Right, so this is the Save Gunnersbury Park campaign. And just to give you a really quick overview of it, for those who don't know, Gunnersbury Park is a small park located between Acton, Chiswick and Ealing in West London. It's a small park that is currently being used for multiple for-profit events. It has a license from Hounslow and Ealing Council for 75 decibel noise level, 30,000 people. It's been leased by the two councils to a CIC company called Gunnersbury CIC for the next 25 years. Now, it has a license to do 14 events every year and 20 medium events. That's a total of 32 events. This year alone, they're looking at about 31 events throughout the summer. Now, that does not mean it's a single day per event. As you can see here from the advance notice, it's about a month setup and taking down everything for each of those 31 events for this year, a maximum of 34. In comparison, Hyde Park has 9 days only at 65 decibels, which is significantly less for such a major park, much bigger than ours, tiny little green space. As you can see, the ticketing and fencing is quite extensive. They use the park as parking, essentially. Facilities are not available. The lake is often cordoned off. Usually you have pedals, people would be using it, feeding the ducks, the swans, which by the way also live during the summer. Majority of the walkways are closed off, so dog walkers and children cannot use the green spaces. Again, you can see here the entirety of the lake area is completely closed off for most of the summer. More parking. It essentially feels like well, I'm not allowed to say the word fortress as such, but you truly cannot access the majority of the park for most of the summer. You often are not allowed inside, even they have stewards at the doors who ask for tickets as you come in. We have videos of them asking people for tickets. If you negotiate your way in, you might be able to get from point A to point B if you manage to get through some of the fencing. The stewards are quite nice, but they will turn you away from the entrances. Now, this is unfortunate. As you can see, the park, you can see the fencing in the red here. It literally takes the entire area. So you will have to negotiate entrance points, if any, to enter into the sports facilities or the children's playground. Now, that means that, as you can see from this side here on the left, you can see that a lot of parents are, well, they're forced to go for quite a bit of a hike to get to the children's playground, if they manage to get to it. Of course, that means that we still have to face anywhere between 90 decibel and 120 decibel is what we have measured within the park. That 75 decibel license does not apply within the park. So anyone taking a stroll, doing any sports, any children's activities, there's no limit inside the noise levels in the park. Now, they also use the museum for small events. It's mostly empty, the first floor. Most of the artifacts they have are currently in storage. We've been trying to find where the storage is, what artifacts are currently there, but there seems to be no list that we are able to get, at least at this stage. We have an idea of costs, but that also varies, depends who you ask, the CIC or the council. So it's quite an interesting situation where a museum is mostly used for private events as well as the whole park itself. Now, they also tend to block off quite a bit of the roads, the main areas where buses go. They're often are closed for those events. So if you're trying to drive somewhere, I hope you don't need an ambulance. You have to plan accordingly. Sports facilities as well, they're often taken over. They're usually paid within this park, so football can be anywhere between £102 to £138 per hour. Cricket is for 6 hours, 197. But even if you can afford this, you still can't use it because it's mostly fenced off during the summer for the events. There is a covenant that has essentially been put in place by the Rothschilds when they sold the park to Ealing and Hounslow councils. Now, the covenant stipulates specifically that the park must be used as a park and for sports facilities. It does not in any way or form allow for these major events and for this commercialization. And yet, as you can see from the commercial activities from last year map, pretty much everything is paid, including fishing in the lake next to the festival events. Some of the festivals are quite expensive. They range from £46 to almost £3,000. Soho House, which is currently on tonight, I can't wait for that. Soho House charges, you have to have membership first. It's between 1,700, I believe, if you're under 27 to 2,000 something per person. And then the tickets are about 270 if you buy the early tickets, a bit more if you buy them late for the event itself. So it adds up to quite a lot, especially if you want to go with anybody like your entire family. This excludes pretty much most of the residents in our area. Some of them may be affluent enough, but the majority of them simply cannot access this event in specific. Now, we've been looking at the finances, and the main argument from the councils is that these events pay for the park. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any evidence of that. Majority of renovations have either been paid by Hounslow Highways, or there was a recent fire in 2020 of the cafe. That fire, of course, was paid for by the insurance and the council itself. So we've been looking at the company house accounts for the CAC that currently manages the park. They do have a profit for last year. They are using 1,800,000 in admin costs. This is outside of any kind of activities such as salaries or maintenance. In comparisons, Royal Parks, who manage multiple parks, including Hyde Park, have only 450K in admin costs. And for the last few years, they have been breaking them down, specifically showing exactly where the staff costs go, exactly what they're using, everything according to the facilities. So we are trying to work closely with the council and the CAC to get them to submit that sort of account where we can see where all the money is going. So we are sure that these events are actually, us losing access to the park actually feeds into the park. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of lack of transparency. We haven't been able to get any FOIA requests because, as you can tell from the Freedom of Information side, this is part of the lease actually given from the councils to the CIC. They specifically stipulate in 22.2.1 calls that they must direct all FOIA requests back to the council, so they cannot answer any FOIA requests directly. Once you go to the council, the reply is often heavily redacted documents like the one on the side. They will tell you that there are no reports, even though we have seen the actual licensing department people sitting outside, taking noise measurements, measuring the amount of traffic, etc. But you cannot simply get any reports from them. As a result, there's been a big response from the local community. Last year alone, we have two separate petitions of 736 signatures and 477 that have gone to the council. There's been 247 formal complaints. We've done some social listening. There was about 28,000 mentions across all of social media at 70% negative sentiment score. Now, that is pretty high numbers, and yet we have been met with silence and no opportunity to change anything. So we've started looking at other problems that are caused by this. We've had multiple drug sales in the area, very unfortunately, because there is a strong police presence inside the park during these events, but there is no police presence in surrounding areas. All the drug sales are currently spilling in front of our houses, and worst of all, in front of the schools. They use stickers, they sell edibles, they sell a lot of nitrous oxide. We've been working with the police closely. We've given them examples. We even took ourselves fingerprints of some of those canisters and gave them to the police, hoping they will follow them up. Neighbors have been sending photos and videos, and yet the drug sales continue, and the issues will simply continue while those festivals go on. There's severe environmental damage. As you can see, this is what site looks like usually after they leave, after every single event. We've specifically looked at measuring the soil. We measured the PHP. We got some advice from Kew Gardens and talked to the RHS who do special testing. We know that according to the RHS testing, it was 5.1, which is needs liming. We've advised the CAC and the council that the soil needs to be limed. Their response was to put a small top layer of soil on top and put some grass on that, which did not grow. It was something, you know, it's better than nothing, but unfortunately, the major issues of the soil being completely compressed and now parts of it not being able to support life just simply continues. There is a master plan that has been submitted to Historic England by the CAC and the councils. Now that master plan is, they are mentioning permanent facilities. So that means they want to continue and expand these music for-profit events. They want to create permanent facilities, roads. They literally, one of the proposals was to remove some quite old trees, some of them over 100 years old, to make space for roads. They wanted to, there's two major buildings, the museum and the small mansion. The small mansion was proposed, as you can see here from an expert from that plan, was proposed to become an Airbnb to support said events as well. Surely you would expect that to remain a museum, but there we are. So that plan, of course, they're now claiming they're not going to go ahead with it only because Historic England released it to us and we made it public. But that plan was 80-page plan, which was submitted to Historic England for funding. And finally, what do we do to oppose all of this? So there is a core group of about 50 members within our community across the park from both Ealing, Brentford, and Chiswick. We all come together and we have a number of stickers, an online group, and we also have been doing some small protests. So we, as you can see, we planted a small garden of resistance onto the events venue. That unfortunately was removed pretty quickly. We were told that the flowers are potentially dangerous, which is quite funny. But they removed the flowers and left a big empty patch, essentially, where the Garden of Resistance was. We are planning some more similar protests. We're trying to keep it civil and we're trying to keep it positive. But we do hope to finally sit at the table with the council, who are the freeholders of this park and are essentially the ones that control who holds the lease and the license. And hopefully, at least, if not completely stop these events and the damage, at least have them acknowledge there is damage to the park, open it up more, remove all the fencing, or at least make more transit points where people can actually access it, and at least lower it to the number of events in Hyde Park, which is a significantly larger, bigger park. So this is it. This is what we've been trying to do, and this is what we are facing. And it sometimes feels like I'm sure you all can agree, it can feel like a David and Goliath struggle, but we do our best, and we support each other and we try to help each other in this. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. That's quite a shocking introduction. I think just the scale of what is being done is phenomenal, and it's been really interesting to see your comparisons and also the comments in relation to the amount of funding that's being used relative to that which is being spent. So yeah, let's take questions first of all. So if you'd like to just give a wave or stick a hand up. Yes, Diane, please, over to you. If you can unmute yourself and just do an introduction.
Hello, I'm Diane from Tulse Hill, South London, Brockwell Park. We've been fighting for lots of years for a similar situation. Obviously, you maybe read about us. It was in the Standard where they actually explained as a nightmare sort of thing, you know, this is terrible, but saying that the councils are asking for a pittance. They do ask for money, it's true, but they receive such a small amount. The Pokemon Festival, for example, which wasn't even noisy and didn't really, it did disrupt the people actually, but it didn't have fencing around it at least. But even so, the Pokemon people got 2 million, earned 2 million from it, and Lambeth Council got 80,000. Not even hundreds of thousands, 80,000. It's a pittance. That's what it said in the Standard. But therefore, my next suggestion, not question, would be, or it is a question, can we all work together? Because together we might have a bit of strength.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. We were also in contact with some of the people that are behind Clapham Common who actually successfully managed to remove Festival Republic. So we've been taking
They did,
advice
they won.
in terms of liability and in terms of what to do. In fact, on their advice, this is a 50-page complaint we submitted to the council. They responded with 2 pages. Sorry, 500
Okay.
pages.
Right.
50 was only.
And another
Jean-
alternative.
Yeah.
Can I say one more bit?
Yeah,
Another
yeah, please do.
alternative. One of the arguments that, or one of the discussions, shall we say, that's been going on the Friends of Brockwell Park is the fact that because Lambeth's argument is we need this so we can get the country show paid for. Actually, that's not true because Ruskin Park had a similar festival to the country festival. It's a much smaller affair, but exactly, they used to be smaller affairs for local people with very small things going on, and therefore they didn't cause any disruption at all, and it's a much better alternative.
You're absolutely right. So Lambeth Country Show, I used to love Lambeth Country Show. I used to go all the time to Lambeth Country Show. And in fact, my partner who is on this call, Anton, as well, I took him once. And the one time I took him, they expanded it and made it so big. There was so much fencing. And it felt like it was worse than Hyde Park, I gotta say. I've not been back since then. Before that, it was so nice and it was chill and it was, you know, for us young people.
Families could go, ordinary people could go. They didn't fence off any of the park at all. Yeah, I'll stop talking.
Okay, that's all right. No, thank you. That's a really valuable contribution. And it sounds like the idea of having a subgroup that's specifically involved in these issues might emerge. But let's see where we go next. Ed, on that, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, folks. I'm Ed. Some of you know me from, I don't know, Clapham Common stuff and potentially other bits around London. Yeah, so we did kind of get rid of things on Clapham Common. Maybe I'll mention that later because things have come back under a different form. But my question was going to be to Sika on the CIC that they've formed. What particular advantages to the council does it have to create a community interest company in order to manage the park? What are they trying to do? What leverage does it give them? What does it allow them?
So it basically allows them to stay out of transparency with the FOI clause within the lease where they don't have to answer anything. They don't have to give us numbers. They don't have to do anything. And whenever we request any detailed accounts, especially around the 1.8 million in admin costs, which I'm very eager as a journalist to get my hands on because I will discover things, I'm sure of it. Well, basically they say it's a commercial exemption. The CIC is a commercial company. We cannot give you that information. Now we will be going to ICO with this and try to fight it so we can get some details, but it essentially just, it's a vehicle for them to stay away from any kind of democratic transparency or essentially just doing even procurement processes, because if they do it under the council, they'll have to do either the tactile exemption, they have to follow full procurement processes. Whereas now there is a little bit murky on who gets the contracts within the park for various bits and pieces. And we haven't just been able to get that information in any shape or form. I'm sure they're all above board, but we'll be very happy to see the numbers to prove that they are in fact above board.
I mean, I'm guessing, Ed, that they must feel that doing it through something that looks like a charity rather than a commercial entity also has a veneer of respectability about it.
To that, they have a charity as well. So they have a charity and a CIC operating at the same time. The charity has about 9K on its books. The CIC has millions on its books.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's the 5 base directors that are trustees on both the charity on the CIC as well. So they're the same people across them. So it's a very complicated, well-developed way of operating it. I believe Wincourt and Co were the ones that advised them originally to do that, to avoid both tax and liability. And
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Ed, does that answer your question?
If I was just going to ask a really short follow-up, if it's okay, which is, I wonder if you know, or if people from CPRE know, is that something that other councils are doing? Is this something that's a common tactic?
So Royal Parks is one other such vehicle that's been set up. But from what I can see from their accounts, they're significantly more transparent and they are giving you a detailed breakdown. Back in 2020, they didn't used to do that, but now they give you a significantly more transparent, you know, this is what we're doing, this is all the parks we're managing, and it's multiple parks under Royal Parks. Whereas this one is potentially, if proven to actually work and be able to silence us and get their way, I suspect they're going to be copying it across multiple boroughs. unfortunately.
Okay. John or Alice, are either of you aware of other cases where this type of vehicle is being used?
No, I don't in detail, but Andrew might know. Maybe Andrew, you could go first, and then I just wanted to ask Seeker a question about the legalities of what they're doing. And the last time we spoke, we talked about whether what they're doing is legal, but perhaps you could just perhaps Andrew might know about other vehicles first. Andrew, wonder if you can introduce yourself and maybe ask your question first, then we can maybe I'll take that
Yeah,
question.
of course. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, my name's Andrew Smith. I'm an academic based at the University of Westminster. I've been looking at the commercialisation of London parks for about 15 years, starting with the use of Greenwich Park for the Olympic Games in 2012 and continuing right through the Battersea Park Formula E controversy, various court cases relating to music festivals in London's public parks, and ongoing through very detailed case studies of Finsbury Park. I did do a big case study of Gunnersbury Park as well, which you might have read, Seeker. Now looking at Brockwell Park and Crystal Palace Park, which are the sort of latest sort of frontiers of this issue, really. So, but going back to the question, I mean, a lot of councils are considering setting up new governance arrangements, and the main motivation is because it helps them to, it's easier for them to generate commercial revenue, and to sort of, that type of setup is better suited to a commercial entity. And it seems that that's much more likely in instances like Gunnersbury Park, where you've got some degree of shared responsibility across boroughs. So we have a lot of London parks on the edge of borough boundaries, including Clapham Common and other cases that were mentioned. Finsbury Park, Victoria Park is a very obvious example too. So in those instances, there's an added justification for setting up a new governance arrangement, because effectively it's not necessarily just one council's responsibility to look after the park. So, I mean, there are mixed views on that. Some groups want to set up a new vehicle because they don't trust their own local authority, and other groups where a new entity has been set up actually regret that because they've now got a less transparent, more commercially orientated organisation, less democratically accountable organisation running their park, and often running it in a very commercially driven way. So it's important to say that people should get together and share knowledge and expertise, and I've been trying to encourage that, but it's very difficult. You should know that it's not just an issue in London, that I have people contacting me all the time from Liverpool, from Newcastle, from Bristol, from Nottingham, from Brighton, and range of cities across the country who are also worried about the way in which their parks are being commercially run as commercial entities. And what was really interesting about Seeker's presentation is that we tend to get obsessed with festivals, but the commercialization of parks is not just about festivals and events. There's a whole range of different ways that our parks are being commercialized and are being effectively monetized and being made to be self-financing. And you raised one way, which is an increasing number of paid for facilities, paid for attractions, paid for services. But there's also other ways it happens through the introduction of more expensive concessions and cafeterias, through sponsorship, through other vehicles as well. So I think it's really important to be aware of the wider issues, and I think there is a real concern about that. And I mean, I have less concerns about some of the inevitable issues associated with events like noise, antisocial behaviour, inconvenience. We know these are problems, but there is a much more fundamental and ideological concern around the way in which our parks are now treated as commercial assets, which can be hired out, hawked around, pimped out even to various companies. As someone from Brockwell Park mentioned, that is also an issue in terms of the returns that are actually made and whether or not they're sufficient to justify the disruption caused. Sorry.
Thank you. No, a really valuable contribution, Andrew. I wonder maybe if you could put in the chat if you published anything on this which is publicly accessible, maybe you can stick a link in the chat for us.
Yeah, I think I've sent a few
Yeah.
things to your colleagues at CPRE, but in the
Okay,
most
well,
important thing to send through
There's loads.
is two documents which we've detailed very specific recommendations. So these aren't academic documents; these are policy documents where we've said this is what needs to happen. So, and I would appreciate if they were shared, because
we'll get them into the newsletter, and we haven't yet produced our first newsletter, but we're intending to, and we'll make sure that's in there. Right.
I think, Ian, just very quickly, I think that we need to get the National Parks Federation, it's the Friends groups, but the national branch really, I think, you know, we could try to write collectively, but actually they're doing a lot of coordination around parks issues. So hopefully we could maybe take an action away, which is to talk about what we can do collectively, maybe write to the new Secretary of State and ask for a meeting or something like that. Perhaps we could keep some actions for the end. And
I thought that sounds like a very useful action, and I guess also London councils would be another route to go down. And I think often I know, and I was a local government officer myself at one time, you know, you're called on to present particular types of arguments, but making sure that the counter arguments are available and that officers involved in parks are aware of what the downsides are. Could be something that we also pick up as an action with London councils. Right, I'm going to take a last question on this one. If you've spoken, if you could just turn your microphone off and put the hand down, that would be helpful. Alison, would you like to turn your mic on and come in?
Hello, you can't see me, I don't know why. About 10 years ago, we did a suite of bat surveys in Gunnersbury Park in advance of the Heritage Lottery bid. That was conditional on the grant. That was actually for Ealing Council, so not for Hounslow. It became apparent when we were doing the bat surveys that, first of all, the drug dealing was on an industrial scale, and it was really Mercedes cars in the car park dealing out of cars. It was very open, and very wealthy people were doing the dealing. Nobody seemed to be interested. The other thing was the events and parties that were going on the buildings that we were trying to survey. Our input to that was because we were quite cross that the vans and cars were parking on the route plates of some of the cedar trees around the museum, which was totally inappropriate. We didn't really know what was going on. We didn't realise it was being used for private parties. And maybe because the Heritage Lottery have got such a big buy-in to the conservation of species these days, and that took years to get them to be interested, maybe some of this should be fed back to them, because it's obviously having a big impact on the ecology. My only recent contact there was when we did a bat walk, and that was for Ealing Council. So it's quite confusing, the different approaches between the two councils at the park. And perhaps, you know, that it should be made clear that Ealing Council have greater concern about the ecology of the park than the other council have.
Alison, thank you. And certainly the idea of engaging with specific issues around species, particularly rare species, was something that came up in our last meeting as one vehicle that one can use for leverage. I'm going to move us on now to the next bit of our agenda, which is John's going to give us an update from CPRE of things that we've been doing recently around campaigning. And then that's going to take 5 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15 minutes left at the end. So if I can just ask people to put their hands down from this bit of the agenda, but stick a hand up whilst John's doing his presentation. And I'll come to you if you want to raise an issue, tell us about your campaign, ask for help, etc. Okay, John, over to you.
John, you need to unmute.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, so I'll start again. Just to add quickly to the previous discussion, we had Wandsworth Common, who couldn't attend today, representatives from there, and they wanted to let us know that a similar issue has happened recently with Zippo Circus, who were using the park and destroyed it pretty badly on a field where they drove across it, and it was a wet day, and I think it finished the park for a few weeks at least. So just to let you know about that as well, and to add to the discussion. So what have we been doing recently at CPRE London? Well, plenty of work around policy and local plans, but really what I would like to talk about today are three key campaigns which have come up and which are reaching important stages, which you might be able to help with as Green Defenders. Firstly, Wimbledon Park, which is a long-running campaign. As you may be aware, the All England Tennis Club want to build on part of Wimbledon Park, and that has now reached the GLA, and a decision is apparently expected this month. I don't know if there's anyone here. I think Chris, possibly from Wimbledon Park, is here. If anyone would like to say anything about any actions that you would like to assist with, or get our Green Defenders to help with them, please do let us know. We can either circulate it after the meeting, or we can discuss it now if you find that helpful. Just put up your hand after I finish speaking, and we can have a minute or so for Wimbledon Park on that important announcement, which is expected in the next month or so. Secondly, Whitewebs Park, and again, this is a long-standing campaign that we've been working on. It went to the court under judicial review. That review was unsuccessful, but there are now plans to appeal that, and for anyone who is interested and would like to help with that, there is an appeal for funding to help with that via the Enfield Road Watch website. And if you Google Enfield Road Watch and go straight to their website, that's on the main page, on the home page. And there's also an opportunity to submit an objection to the planning application which has gone into Enfield Council. So we'd really appreciate your help with that. And if you have time, the deadline has passed, but they will still accept objections right up until the committee meet, and they haven't yet. So there is time to help with that one.
Can I just ask, is that the one to do with Tottenham Hotspurs using it?
It is, yeah. It's
Yes,
Tottenham
okay.
Hotspur wanting to build a women's training facility on top of a very wild area of that park, which is much loved by locals. So absolutely, very similar to the Wimbledon case. Commercialization on a grand level, including destroying and removing parts of parks, rather than just having an event on them. So two key campaigns on that respect. And also, I just wondered if Alice might be able to give us a quick update on the third and final campaign which we're working on, which is the Finsbury Leisure Centre. And that's a situation where AstroTurf pitches in Islington are going to be removed, and houses and trees are going to, well, trees removed, houses built, and the football pitches made much smaller and put on the top of a roof, where people can't go to them. So a massive loss of open space. And Alice, is there anything you'd like to add on that important campaign?
Not really, but to say that it is a very different campaign. It's not designated open space even, but it is a bit like a square, if you like, but it is all covered in 5-a-side or 7-a-side actually football pitches, and is used as an open space in an area where there is virtually none. Islington has less open space, I think, than any other borough in the country or something like that. So we're super concerned about that because they're proposing to put very high density buildings on it. And of course, we do understand about the housing crisis, but I think in this case, we just very, very much believe that this is not okay from the point of view of provision of green and open space. So we've been working to do what we can with those local groups as well. It's EC1 Voices, if anybody's interested in looking that up.
Thank you, Alice. And we've CPRE in London has done a lot of work around mapping alternative spaces that could be used for housing development. Of course, it's not, we're opposed to housing development, but there are plenty of opportunities around without encroaching on leisure space or green space in that kind of way. John, is there anything else you want to add?
No,
I
not
can
at
see we've got.
all. Clive
Okay.
Hilton might want to have a word
Yeah,
about Wimbledon
but
Park,
let's-
but no more
yeah,
from
let's
me.
go
That's
over-
everything from me.
Let's get. Thanks, John. We'll come back to
Yes,
you later
hi.
on
Thank
the
you very
newsletter.
much. An excellent session. I think Sika did a great job. Thank you. Save Wimbledon Park. We're working. Wimbledon Park is a municipal park, but then there's a golf course next door which has been bought by the All England. And rather than festivals, which are a minority aspect, the All England is a national, international event. So we're up against a much loved institution, really, but they're behaving very badly. They're not listening to us, but we have it. They put their application in 3 years ago, and it still hasn't been heard. It was passed by Merton, it was refused by Wandsworth, and now it's with the GLA, and it's with the Deputy Mayor Jules Pipe at the GLA. So any objections should be sent to the GLA. If you go onto the Save Wimbledon Park website, which is, I must say, an excellent website. Well, I think we're punching above our weight with websites, to be honest. It is an excellent source of information, as is the Wimbledon Society website. You can use both those for information, but if you'll then find the link to the GLA website and you can put your objections in. It won't be heard this month. It won't be heard before September, now we understand. So we've thrown a few obstacles in their way and we've considerably delayed their plans. They have an option. They could have gone to Roehampton. They've chosen to expand, but they talk about the increase in employment as one of the benefits, but there will be no increase in employment because the people who are working in Roehampton will be made redundant and they'll be employing the same number of people, and no merger where there's no increased demand, no merger increases the number of people required. So it's a fairly false argument, in addition to all the environmental horrors we're dealing with. If there are any questions on that, I'd be delighted to answer any.
Thank you, Clive. Any questions for Clive on that? And I would add, another great source of info where Clive and his colleagues done a great job. He's getting Private Eye signed up to be on your side.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Right.
Private Eye have been extremely helpful. I have to say, we have a very good in with them now, and they have been extremely helpful to us. Very positive. Yeah, and
we had a comment from our speaker last time about building media campaigns, and the way you've gone about that is a good example of how it can be done.
Yeah, we have an excellent PR guy. Yeah.
Thanks, Clive. Alice, you've got a real hand up as opposed to a virtual one.
Yeah, I did want to ask about this legal issue that I asked about earlier, because as I understand it, it is not legal to just take over a park for events, and there are parameters around which. So I don't know, Sika, if you, or I saw that Michael, who's been helping with this too, and a bit might have something, or do you have any feeling about?
If Michael is on the call, he's probably better than me to say this, but essentially there is a covenant currently governing the park. That covenant stipulates specifically that it's only for sports and park purposes. So they really should not be using it for anything such as large commercial activity. A park could be potentially, I guess, considered anything that's a coffee shop, something that's for the public benefit, even a small, I mean, we do love events such as, smaller events that are for the public. We recently had one with multiple food and local-based producers, which is amazing and lovely. And this is what we want to see. And as young people, we do love a small festival, but, not massive for-profit Festival Republic.
Sure. I mean, I think there's legislation, I don't know if it applies to this park, which says that you can only use the park for a certain amount of time and only a certain size in the park. But perhaps, Michael, you could help us out here.
It's supposed to be just 10%. That was the Parks Act of 1967, I think.
Thanks, Gina. Maybe Michael can help
Yeah.
clarify for us.
You're absolutely right that that's applicable in London. But the problem we have, as a lot of people on the call I suspect will know, is with the Finsbury Park decision of the Court of Appeal a few years back, which says that the 67 Act is not the governing act for this purpose. It's the Local Government Act of 1972, and in particular section 145 of that, which creates a real problem. I think I see Andrew nodding, maybe more expert on this than I am.
No, that's exactly right. I think it's the 1968 Act, the London Act, but it's a really good piece of legislation, which is still live legislation. It's just that it's been usurped by a subsequent piece of legislation, and there's still disputes over it. And obviously, the Finsbury Park decision was a big blow. But it's interesting that some councils still seem to be trying to adhere to that 10% rule. And I think in some ways that's exactly the way things should proceed now, is to try and get that legislation updated and enacted and enforced, because it is a really good piece of legislation that anticipated the problems that we're now facing about effectively the organisations responsible for parks having an incentive to effectively use them for commercially advantageous reasons. So it's actually, it's a very good piece of legislation. It's just that, as you say, the decision was that the 1972 Local Government Act effectively usurped it.
So I think I'm right in saying that there's no temporal or spatial limit under the 1972 Act, when there was at least a spatial limit under the 67.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and again, there was also a temporal issue in terms of, I think there was a limit on the number of weekends every year that events could be staged. So again, I think it was 8 Sundays. It's very archaic language, but 8 Sundays could be taken up by events.
So where we are now is, I think nothing stops a council using the entirety of a park for a succession of temporary events right the way through the summer, which sounds as though is exactly what's happening at Gunnersbury Park. Now, Gunnersbury Park has the advantage that there is, or at least maybe, an effective private law covenant existing since way back in 1925, and Seeker is looking into whether it remains enforceable by current landowners in the vicinity of the park, for whose benefit it may have been taken back in 1925. But it's a little bit of a long shot, but it is something which would enable one to sidestep the effect of the Local Government Act and its interpretation in the Finsbury Park case. But it's not every park. In fact, it's very few parks that are going to have that.
I mean, and again, I think that's spot on. And my suggestion is that, we shouldn't stop parks staging major events. I mean, they're a long tradition of staging them. They can play a positive role, but we do need limits. We do need to enforce sort of policies on it. And I think there does need to be just, like a rethink. And I think Ed will know more, but there are also my own position is that we should be protecting open spaces in particular, because there are a lot of commons in South London, a lot of open heath areas, Blackheath, Peckham Rye, Clapham Common, other Streatham Common, which are now also being enclosed for events. And that is a much more significant issue, because enclosure on metropolitan commons is, a very significant thing, you know what I mean? And actually it has much wider ramifications than using parks for events, which is admittedly a long established practice. And most parks are already enclosed to a certain extent. That, they're not the same as open land, and so I think there's a very important case to be made for places like Clapham Common, where even temporary enclosures are a big problem. They can lead to, some of my research has proved that they can lead to further commercial incursions. They are they can be the thin end of the wedge that can lead to incremental problems, and even ultimately like development and the loss of that public space.
Can I go in? I can't seem to raise my hand, but wouldn't this be something that would be something that trying to revive the 1967 Act? Coming from Finsbury Park, we feel a bit guilty because we're partly responsible for this change. isn't there anything that we could do, the CPRE could do, as part of this attempt to revive it, with local politicians? We've got possibly a new lot of people coming in, and we've got Sadiq Khan. I don't quite know what his position is, but there are, I know that people in Wandsworth had been working, and Clapham Common, with certain politicians and GLA people precisely on this. This seems like quite a good way forward for us, because we are all stuck.
Yeah,
absolutely
Gina,
stuck.
I think I'm conscious of time, and we do commit to finishing these meetings. We've said that we'll try and get a follow-up meeting specifically on this topic, and it sounds like there are definitely some ideas ranging from what good practice looks like through to thinking about what you can do on legal challenge, through to political action around trying to work with a new government to make sure there's legislation which is fit for purpose here. Ed, I'll give you I can see you put your hand up again, so if you've got something that you can make fairly brief, that would be helpful.
Yes, it's one of my favorite topics, so I will be really brief, which is just to say that, yes, indeed, Commons do have special protections under the Commons Act against enclosure. That's what we got a public inquiry over, whether events could be held on Commons. Unfortunately, the decision went against us, although there were restrictions to the event size area, which has made it more difficult for them. We can stick to the 10% on Commons, the 10% rule. Parks are more complicated. It may depend also on the trusts and covenants they're held under, as we've discussed. What I would suggest is the way forward is we need to identify the park where it's best to try to bring another legal challenge of some kind due to things it's held under. Brockwell Park, there's a specific Brockwell Park court decision which says that, or is it a small piece of legislation which says that Brockwell Park is not to be used for commercial events, so that might be such a one to look at. But obviously there are other places like Gunnersbury potentially that could be to do something for. But I'd really welcome another dedicated meeting on this.
Me too.
Hosted by you folks, it would be great.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll take that one away, Ian.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alice, and Ed, and colleagues. Thank you for all of those thoughts and ideas. Right. So as we move towards a close, I can't see any other hands up at the moment. John, are you just going to come back and just say a little bit about how people can get things into our newsletter? We're planning to issue a first newsletter for this group in the next couple of months.
Yes, please do email me, john@cprelondon.org.uk, with anything you'd like to be included in there. We want to try and keep it short, snappy and relevant, with links and actions at paramount. So please do send something over. We can't put reams into the newsletter, but I think we're planning a slightly sort of expanded version of what you would have received before the last meeting, which was simply the list of petitions. This time we'd like to maybe include a little bit more and also follow up on some of these discussions today.
Yeah, and there's a great list of lessons from the speaker at our last meeting on how to organise a campaign, which I think would be well worth sharing, because they clearly apply in this case as well.
I think we have a blog on our website about that, so we can share that.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll put some links in that newsletter. Sika, first of all, thank you very much, but I wonder if you just have anything else that you'd like to add finally?
No, I just wanted to say thank you all. You are a wonderful group. I'm very pleased to have been invited today and to listen to all of your wonderful suggestions. And again, I've realized I've followed quite a few of you and chatted to you over emails, etc. It's great to put faces to everyone's names. It's just lovely. Thank you, guys.
Well, it's a pleasure to hear from you, and that's really the core of what this group is about, creating a network of like-minded people who can work together to tackle some of these issues we're facing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. and we look forward to seeing you again. So John's mentioned that we have a next meeting planned, so that's the same time, a Thursday 1 till 2 on the 10th of October, and there's a subsequent meeting planned for the 15th of January. So do get those in your diary. Do sign up to each other's petitions. And also, if any of you would like to support our work, please do become a member of CPRE London for a very modest fee. You can sign up, and there's a proportion of that comes to us as an organisation and helps to support the great work of people like Alice and John. So please do become a member of CPRE, and you can select London as the local organisation you want to join. Okay, thank you once again for all of your time. John and Alice, should we just stay on the line for a little quick wrap up afterwards? Thank you all, and I hope to see you again in October. Bye-bye.